she's limping.
On the front.
Oh goodness, poor Sally.
Alright, Sally is front left, Sue is front right.
Okay.
Welcome everyone to Whoopsie Daisy Farm. Today we are going to show you what we do when our ewes need some extra hoof care. We were out doing chores and we noticed our dairy ewe Sally was limping really bad. Her sister Sue was also limping, and Sally's daughter Luna was kneeling when she ate. And so we're going to go over what we do when we know there's some hoof rot or scald issues, so that if you have a similar issue on your farm or homestead, you will know what to do. One of the things with dairy sheep is they have a propensity for hoof issues because a lot of times either in their genetics or they themselves have been grain fed. So when you grain feed a ruminant, it tends to make wool grow faster and their hoofs grow faster. We try to limit grain to a minimum, but the farm we got our two first dairy sheep from fed a lot of grain. Grain doesn't automatically mean you're going to have hoof issues, but it does tend to increase your odds. And it may not have been only the grain that they were fed at a different farm, but also just their genetics are Icelandic, Awasi, and East Frisian, and those breeds, with the exception of the Awasi, tend to struggle in Kentucky's humidity. They tend to do better in the northern states and not south of the Mason-Dixon line. So they have other qualities that we really appreciate in our flock, but their hooves tend to need a little bit more TLC than the rest of these sheep. Hey Sally, you wanna come here? So some of you might be wondering, how do we know for sure it's her hoof? Mainly because we looked at it last week and we know this ewe has a penchant for hoof problems. Just because a sheep is limping does not automatically mean that something's wrong with their hoofs. It might mean that, you know, they jumped funny and they twisted something or sprained something or bruised something. It could be that another sheep headbutted them wrong, and so that muscle is just sore. And so it's not safe to assume that just because your sheep is limping that there's something wrong with their hooves. You need to actually get hands on that sheep and look and see if there's something wrong with the hoof. And if you don't see anything wrong with the hoof, if you trimmed it recently, maybe you just nicked it too close and so it's tender, or it may not be the hoof. Like, you need to actually examine and kind of feel up the leg, feel the muscles that go off the leg, and just see if there's tenderness in, you know, joints and muscles, because limping does not automatically mean hoof issue. Another sign that something's wrong with the hooves is when they kneel like this while they're grazing. Sometimes it's just they're trying to get to a tasty snack they can't get to otherwise, but in this instance, Luna can definitely get to the grass she's munching on, and she's still kneeling, so that tells me her front hooves are tender. Sam's really interested in what you're doing.
Yes, so I have the copper sulfate that we mixed up last time, that we soaked their hooves in the solution. This is what was left over. So we're going to put in a spray bottle today because, number one, we're out here, and number two, trying to soak their hooves for however long it said to do it was a nightmare. So,
yeah, our sheep do not appreciate hoof soakage.
But I don't know all the ins and outs and the chemical compounds of this stuff, but I do make sure I wear gloves whenever I'm using it, because...
Well, you have really super sensitive skin.
I do, but from all the warnings and stuff like that, if I remember correctly, you need to kind of have some sort of protection, so I would not just be grabbing that barehanded.
Okay.
Just to give some protection against spills, stuff like that. Alright. So our plan is to just trim their hooves and then spray that onto the hoof.
Yeah.
Rather than doing a soaking.
Yep.
Soaking thing.
You, what are you doing here?
I'm Austin. I work here. Yeah. That's all I gotta say.
Short, sweet, to the point.
I need to get you a t-shirt, dude.
I do need one.
Yeah. You want a t-shirt or a hoodie?
I'll take a t-shirt.
T-shirt, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Hi. Hi.
Since I have her already.
Luna?
Yeah. Come here, Luna.
All right, Austin, jump in there.
So you take my place from right behind me. All right, she's gonna lay back against you, like that. Yep, I just need you to keep her from moving around. Good job, good girl. All right, so it was her, what did I say, her right hoof
I think so.
is the one we're most concerned about. Actually, I'll start with that one then. They're hard.
That's good.
They're hard hooves.
So if
but-
there's infection, it's typically soft and squishy.
Yeah.
So it got spongy where the hoof was growing over it.
Yep. That's very soft.
Oof.
Yeah.
Poor Luna. Slommy's like, what are you doing?
It goes through hard and it's getting down to really soft, and I'm seeing pus and junk and
Okay, so that's hoof rot.
yeah. Like I'm a little worried what's gonna happen when I take that scab off. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think I need to.
Yeah.
Ooh. It's the first time I've ever smelled it.
Yeah. All right, so that hoof is softer.
It's very soft.
All right, so it's not rotting, it's just soft.
Soft.
Which is when hoof rot can set up.
I'm just seeing soft hoof. Like I'm not seeing any trouble.
Okay.
It's just more soft hoof.
Now you're okay, girl. She's like, no.
Alright, take that head. I'm just gonna take your legs. Lay her down. There you go, like that. Good job. Wonderful job. They keep saying, you know, you just twist their head and stuff like that. I'm like, somebody's got to teach me better than that.
Does it stink?
Some. Stop. All right.
Can let her go now.
All right.
Good work, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, also just let Sam sniff your fingers. There you go. Don't scratch him on the front of his head, because that means you want to fight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just scratch him underneath his chin.
Oh, if he comes up to you, scratch him in his ear. If you don't scratch
So now he's just checking on the girls. Aren't you, boy?
Hi. Okie dokie.
So what are you doing?
Putting up the fences right now.
What for?
Huh?
What for?
For the sheeps? I'm guessing. I don't know.
You don't know. You just do what you're told, right?
Yeah,
You just work here. You're the brawn, not the brains, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this one, I get the goopy stuff out, is mineral. So it's Premier One's selenium and vitamin E enhanced mineral. And then this stuff is kelp. So we just get it from a Amish garden center, and it's a source of minerals and protein for the sheep.
Really? Wow.
So even if you can't get good minerals, we found if you have free choice kelp out for the sheep, it really helps their health just stay healthy.
Ain't there such thing called a kelp drink?
I think.
Ain't it a green drink?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Kelp is good for humans and animals and all kinds of stuff.
All right, so this is Premier One's sheep mineral, and this one is really good. We actually will feed our ewes this one with vitamin E and selenium when they're pregnant and right after lambing, just to restore any mineral and vitamin stores they have used up in pregnancy, lambing, and the beginning of lactation. So if you're not sure, I would say go ahead and start with just their general ones. They have several mineral mixes on their website, and if you have questions, you can definitely call the company. Their customer service is great. They're super helpful and knowledgeable. But like I said, if you don't know if you need any fortification, I would just go ahead and start with a more generic one from them, and then switch to one of the more specific ones if you're noticing your sheep still have deficiencies. So I know I'm going to get some comments from someone somewhere at some point that says, oh my gosh, kelp has copper in it, and you just sprayed your sheep's hoof with copper, and copper's going to kill sheep, and how dare you give your sheep copper? So, number one, sheep do need some copper. They just don't need as much copper as goats. If you give your sheep the amount of copper you're supposed to give goats or other critters, they will die of copper poisoning. But they still need some copper. So the amount of copper we sprayed on their hooves is not enough to harm them, and the amount of copper in kelp is actually the amount that they need. If they have enough copper in their system, they'll stop eating the kelp. It's the same stuff you've had. Hi, Stomps. The other thing is that with sheep and copper, what I have noticed is it seems like heritage and primitive breeds require more copper in their diet than commercial or super developed breeds. So a high percentage East Frisian, for example, isn't going to need or want or do well with the same amount of copper as an Icelandic or a Gulf Coast native sheep. So you really need to pay attention to your flock's health. We do use copper boluses on our ewes in the springtime and when parasites seem to be super intense. But we do not have any high percentage East Frisian or commercial breeds. All of our sheep are heritage breeds mixed with some dairy sheep. So we have East Frisian genetics in our flock, but it's not super high percentages. So for someone just starting out, I would recommend you start with kelp, for example, and if your sheep are still having some hardcore issues with parasites, you look into other methods of giving them some copper, either a high quality mineral mix or something else. I don't think you should just start off out of the gates copper bolusing your sheep if you're not already familiar with what their copper needs are. All right, so we have Sally, who was the worst one with the hoof rot.
Yes.
And we've been spraying her hoof every day this week, and it looks a lot better.
Seems to be doing my pant. Let me see if I can get some of that
Oh, okay.
away.
And that seems to be a lot.
That seems to be a lot better, yes. I'll try to get sure you can get up in there.
Yeah, and she ran up to the fence with the rest of the flock, so she's not limping nearly as bad.
Yep.
Okay.
See if I can split it a little bit.
Hi. You look very Icelandic-y.
You do.
Hi. No? It's like you have no treats.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. These aren't treats. Hi. That's better. You don't want to talk? So she's hardly limping at all, which is great. She's a little standoffish, but she hates being manhandled, so that makes sense. When sheep don't feel good, they typically tend to isolate themselves. So Sally is definitely responding well to this treatment with her hooves. Sue is limping a little bit more, and so is Luna, who just walked past there. But we weren't treating their hooves every single day with the copper sulfate spray like we were with Sally. So we did spray Luna and Sue today, and then we'll be checking them probably on an every other day basis. You guys say hi. She is my friendliest sheep. So we don't want anything to happen to her. So yeah, Sally's hooves were the worst. So she was getting treatment every day. So her limp is pretty much gone. Sue and Luna's limp is still visible. So they're going to need treatment probably every other day. And then we have noticed a couple of the other sheep, the ram and the other Icelandic cross, they're starting to limp. So we'll trim their hooves this Saturday and then see if we need to do copper sulfate. If it's not as bad as Sally's hooves were, then we will probably forego copper sulfate and go for iodine instead. We get a sprayable iodine from our feed store, and I'm pretty sure you can get that, you know, at any feed store, or I've seen it at Walmart in the pharmaceutical section. I don't dilute it. I just spray the iodine directly onto the infected hooves, and it acts as an antiseptic. And then I'll do that probably a couple of days after they stop limping, just to make sure the infection is completely gone. You know, nuclear level for hooves is copper sulfate spray. The next one is iodine. And then after that, there is a product at feed stores specifically formulated for hooves, and it says hoof rot and hoof scald and, you know, just hoof issues. I'll use that as like the least invasive one. I feel like the iodine and the copper sulfate are more intense. And I wouldn't typically go to those first. It's just we do have a history with these particular sheep with hoof problems. So we knew we needed to hit it hard and heavy first thing out of the gate. So you all get to come into my kitchen for a second while I add a few things to the end. So I am not a veterinarian. I do not have any formal training when it comes to diagnosing, treating, or curing animals. I am just sharing what works on my farm. I'm sharing the remedies and supplements that we have found value in. So I completely forgot to tell you out in the pastures what the ratio of copper sulfate is to water. You want to mix up a solution of 20% copper sulfate to the 100% water. So what does that mean? So if you have 1 gallon, that's 100%, you want 20% of what 1 gallon is. We only mix our copper sulfate up at a gallon at a time because you don't need a ton per treatment. All the math people are going to jump on here and be like, yeah, because I hate decimals, I hate percentages. Those were not my strong point in math class. But if you take 1 gallon of water and you need 20% of copper sulfate, the way we calculated it was there's 16 cups of water to a gallon. So we would do about 3 cups, a little bit over, of copper sulfate for the gallon. Now, there's obviously dry measurements to wet measurements, and yes, I know that 20% of 16 cups is not exactly 3 cups, but the nice thing with natural remedies is you don't have to be a exact chemist, or at least that's not how we did it on our farm. So if you hop onto the state university's recommended treatments for hoof rot, they do have some differences on the articles between hoof scald, hoof rot, hoof abscesses, wet conditions. Ohio State University is one, Michigan State University is another one I looked up. They do not recommend copper sulfate. They recommend zinc sulfate, which is what's in the hoof and heel treatment anyway. We have just found that the zinc does not kick out the hoof rot for Sally specifically. She needs copper, and I really think that's because the conventional shepherding in America does not recognize that sheep require copper, or at least they're starting to wake up, but it's not as well known as we've experienced it to be true. So just be mindful of that. If you look up hoof rot treatments, they're all going to say, do not use copper sulfate. We do. None of our sheep have died from it. It helps them get over the hoof. In the comments, if this helped alleviate some concerns, if it answered your questions about hoof rot and hoof scald, if it added more questions and you want me to answer those, and please feel free to like, subscribe, share this with all your friends who are interested in sheep content.